Welcome back to A Better Choice Homestead, where on my channel I focus on food, growing it, preparing it, and preserving it. Today is Tuesday, so we are doing an edition of Tasty Tuesday, and tonight I'm going to show you how to make an absolutely delicious roast beef dinner. Now, this is a meal that I usually do for Christmas or maybe Easter, a holiday. It does take a full hour to cook, but it is oh so good. This last Christmas, I was so thankful that I had a bunch of roasts in my freezer because when I was at the grocery store, I just perused the meat section and I could not believe the price that they had on roasts that were only 5-pound roasts. They were literally $200. Absolutely insane. I buy my meat every year from a local farmer and he processes it through his butcher and then I pick it up at his farm. And that lasts me 1 to 1.5 years. The last time I picked up was January of 2024 and I'm still working through that in my freezer. I am trying to diligently do that now so I can get my next order placed. And I will probably also be doing some upcoming freeze dry videos for my Freeze Dry Friday segment with some meat, both raw and cooked, just to help me work through that and get some into long-term storage. But I did pull out a nice roast here. Now this is nothing special. This is not like a standing rib roast or even a ribeye roast. There's not a lot of marbling on this, and that is where all of your flavor comes from, and that is the roasts that are really expensive in the grocery store. But you don't have to pay that to get an incredible meal. I'm gonna show you how. I have defrosted this in the refrigerator and poured off most of the juice, and I'm gonna be putting that into a preheated oven in a roasting pan on top of a wire rack. And we're going to infuse this with some amazing flavor. So I'm just gonna pull this out and just for now, get it into my pan. This is about a 3¼ pound roast. There's a little bit of a fat cap on top. That's gonna help with the flavor. Now this method of cooking will work with any type of roast you have. This happens to be a bottom round roast. I've done it with a top round. You can do it with any roast that you have. I promise you this is gonna come out great. In a bowl, I have about 2.5 tablespoons of some olive oil. And to that, I'm gonna mince down 2 cloves of garlic and just add it right to this bowl. And sometimes it slides up the sides on you, so I always just lift that, put it back in there, and just maximize what I'm getting out of those garlic cloves. Next, I am gonna add some rosemary. This is freeze-dried. You can use fresh, you can use dried, whatever you have. And I'm just gonna do, I don't know, what is this? Maybe, once it's crunched down, maybe a good 2 teaspoons up to a tablespoon. Oh, smells so good. I love freeze-dried herbs because they maintain all of their aroma and flavor. I'm also going to add some thyme. About the same amount, so 2 to 3 teaspoons up to a tablespoon, and that's just your preference. But the more herbs, I think, the better, because we're really going to be adding flavor to that roast. And I'm also gonna add a little bit of marjoram. I'm still playing around with marjoram, still learning what it does to food and what I like, so I'm only gonna add a little bit of that, not too much. I have a big stem. I always try to be careful to get the stems out before I freeze dry them so I don't have a lot of stems in my finished product, but it looks like a couple escaped me. I'm gonna add a little pinch of pepper. Actually 2. That was maybe half a teaspoon. And then I'm gonna add some salt. Now, I personally like kosher salt when I'm seasoning the outside of raw meat, especially beef, because it just helps get a nice crust on the outside. So I'm gonna do 3 pinches of salt. These are just 3 finger and thumb pinches. That's typically how I measure my salt and pepper. I just eyeball it and I just put in what sounds good. But if you're new in the kitchen, start with something like that. Just 3 fingers and a thumb pinch. And I'm just gonna get that mixed together with a little basting brush here. And now we're just gonna baste Oh, our oven is preheated. So that is preheated to 325. Now, I could have preheated this to 425, put it in there for about 15 minutes, and then lowered the temp to 325 for the rest of the cooking process. But I'm going to be serving some Yorkshire pudding with this, and Yorkshire pudding needs to bake the last 30 minutes or bake for 20 minutes, heat the pan for 10 of the cooking time for the roast. So I'm going to do that spike in temp at the end of this. So we're starting at 325. We're going to cook it for 30 minutes. Then we're going to put in our Yorkshire pudding pan to get it screaming hot. And then we're going to add the ingredients to that to the pan and just bake it off for the last 20 minutes. So to this roast, I'm going to start with the non-fat side because we're going to be just turning this to baste this on every side. And you do, if you're going to be making Yorkshire pudding, you do want to use, if you can, a roast that does have a bit of a fat cap on it or some good marbling, because you need about a 1/4 cup of drippings to go into your Yorkshire pudding pan. I grew up on Yorkshire pudding. My family is Irish German, and that is one of the holiday meals that they would serve every year in my family. My father used to make it, and so I just continued that tradition. So this is what we usually have for Christmas with some additional fixings. We love this meal. It is so incredibly good. And even better, the next day, you've got your roast beef sandwiches or your leftovers, and that Yorkshire pudding the next day is to die for. It is such an easy breakfast bread to have. It's really delicious. All right, now we're going to season that top fat cap. I'm going to see if I can get him to stand up a little better, but maybe not, and that's okay. This is my only roasting pan. Well, that's not true. I have a larger one, a turkey roasting pan. When I moved into this house, I really downsized because I was struggling with moving. That was such a pain. I really wanted to go minimalistic, and I actually got rid of a lot of my kitchen stuff, and I'm living to regret that, but we're making do. So there is a lot of space in here. If you didn't want to do Yorkshire pudding, just throw some potatoes in here with it. Just spread them all around. They'll cook just fine for an hour in the oven with the roast. Now, if you want this to be like a medium rare, you're going to pull this when it's at 130 degrees, and we're going to let it rest for about 20 minutes, and then your end temp should be about 135. If you want it medium, then you're going to pull it at 140 degrees, let it rest, and the temp should rise to 145. I'm going to go somewhere slightly between there if I can catch it in time. I like meat just a little bit darker. The rest of the family likes it a little bit redder, and I don't mind going to the redder side because that leaves me some room to cook it again the next day as a reheated meal without it drying out too much. So this is going to go into the oven, and now we're going to make the batter for the Yorkshire pudding. Doesn't that look good? Total cook time on that should be 45 minutes to 1 hour. And I put it on the lower third of the oven because the Yorkshire pudding is going to go on to the upper third. For the Yorkshire pudding batter, I'm going to start with 1 cup of milk. I don't keep milk in the house because we don't drink milk. Once in a while when I have that granola that I made on one of my videos. But for the most part, we don't. So what I do is I keep powdered milk in the house. And this is a really good one. This is an A2 organic whole milk that I source at Azure Standard. And then I just use my food saver, suck all the air out, keep it in the freezer until I'm ready to open it, and then it stores beautifully in the refrigerator until it's gone. I just used the last of it, so I pulled this one out to replace the one and put it in my fridge. That way I'm never out of milk when I want to make a meal. So I have 1 cup of water, and to that I'm going to add 1/4 cup of milk powder. And this cup just has a little mixing wire ball in it that just gets it mixed up really quick. I could have also done that in here, but I chose to dirty an extra dish. Not really. I should have just done it in here, but that's okay. I'm used to doing it in this cup. And then I'm just gonna pour it out the spout because of that mixing ball. Instant 1 cup of milk. Now, if I was gonna drink this or use it for cereal or something where I was gonna be consuming like actual milk, I would stick it in the refrigerator for at least probably 30 minutes to an hour. I'm gonna add, to the 1 cup of milk, I'm gonna add 1 cup of measured flour. I didn't weigh it or anything, it's just 1 cup of flour. I'm gonna add a couple pinches of salt or about a half a teaspoon. I'm just doing a 2-finger plus thumb on this one. So that's about a 1/2 teaspoon. And then I'm going to add 2 eggs. And then we're going to get that blended up. And this might be very similar to a popover recipe. I don't know, I've never made popovers, but for some reason I'm thinking that if you made these in muffin cups, it would pretty much be a popover. Let me know if I'm wrong. In addition to these ingredients, we are going to be using some of the drippings from the roast before we put them into the oven. Maybe that's the differentiator, you tell me. All right, I'm just going to mix this. Looks like I've got a little flour stuck to the side, so I'm just going to do a quick scrape down, make sure that everything gets mixed in. Looks good everywhere else, so one more quick run through the blender. All right, I'm going to pop this into the fridge for 30 minutes. When my timer goes off, I'll meet you back here so we can get that pan ready for the batter. Timer just went off on the oven, so the roast has been in there for 30 minutes. I'm going to pull it out. And we're going to see how much drippings we have. And if it doesn't equal 1/4 cup, I've got some olive oil on standby. This is just regular, it's not extra virgin. I'm going to lift that roast out of the pan just for a minute, and I'm going to try to do that without poking any holes in it. I don't want extra holes in here, even though we are going to have to temp it to ensure it's done before we take it out. But I need to get those pan drippings poured off into a measuring cup. We're looking for 1/4 cup, and this smells incredible. If you are not currently cooking with herbs, fresh herbs, freeze-dried herbs, dried herbs, herbs that you grow in your garden, please buy some seeds this year and start growing herbs. It makes all the difference. My house smells incredible right now. And honestly, it smelled that way about 10 minutes after putting the roast in. Now, if you didn't want to make the Yorkshire pudding, you could save these drippings. Let's see, how much did we get? Oh, we got exactly 1/4 cup, so we're good. You could save those drippings to make a pan gravy if you wanted to do potatoes instead. So I'm going to get this back in. And I'm just holding it. I'm not poking at it. Oh, man, that smells so good. And I'm just going to pour these into my 8x8 pan, because that's what I have. This is a Pyrex 8x8. If you have a dark metal pan, you can use that as well. I think that's what my dad used to use, but it's been 40-something years since I was at home and enjoying that. So now that that's in here, I'm going to put this on the top rack of the oven, put this back on the bottom rack, go for 10 more minutes, then we're going to pull this out and quickly pour our cooling Yorkshire pudding batter into a screaming hot pan. So, top rack. Bottom rack. And 10 minutes, during which time I'm gonna get my vegetable ready. Tonight we are gonna be serving this with pan-seared tender crisp asparagus. I've got my chilled batter here, which is thickened just slightly. And I'm gonna bump the temp up on the oven to 425. And I'm gonna pull out that pan for the Yorkshire pudding. Which is nice and hot with the drippings at the bottom, also nice and hot. And I'm just gonna pour that batter right over the top of those beef drippings. Thick, so I'm gonna scrape some of that out with a little spatula here as well. That looks perfect. Now we're gonna put this back into the oven and we're not gonna open the door again until this is ready to come out. It needs 20 minutes in there. If you open it, it could deflate on you. So we're looking for a nice puff on the top, but let me give you a close-up of what this looks like before we stick it back in. So you can see we've got the drippings in here that are just surrounding it, top, bottom, and sides. It has that wonderful beef flavor in there as well as all of those herbs. We're gonna pop this back in, set our timer for 20 minutes, and then I will be back. We'll take this out of the oven, let the meat rest, and get our vegetable cooked. Timer has just gone off, so we're gonna go ahead and pull those 2 pans out of the oven. I've got one trivet here, let me grab another. And I'm gonna temp the roast beef to make sure it's done. The Yorkshire pudding should be done. Oh, it smells so good. Oh, and our Yorkshire pudding looks amazing. This looks stunning. I'll give you a close-up on that. Oh, it looks amazing. And on this, we're looking for 130 to 135 degrees internal temp before I turn off that oven. So let me do that really quick. I'm gonna go into the very center of the meat. There's no bone on here. So I'm gonna eyeball about where center would be on the thermometer. And we're gonna take a read. We're only at 128. That's a little rare for me, so I'm gonna pop that back in for maybe 5-7 minutes and we'll get another read on it in just a second. In the meantime, I'll show you what this Yorkshire pudding looks like. It can sit out for a while because it is sitting in some screaming hot juices. And here is our incredible Yorkshire pudding. We got a little bit of puff around the edges. The center didn't fully puff up. That's okay. Yorkshire pudding can be a little bit finicky. And if you have a dark pan, like a muffin pan, you might get more of a convex outcome. But this is going to taste incredible, served with just a little bit of butter on it, or even some additional drippings from the bottom of the pan because there are more in there. If you did make potatoes with this, you'd probably want to pour your drippings off after the roast had fully cooked to take advantage of all of those drippings. Make your roux with that. And then you could add some beef stock, even if it's homemade, just with some beef broth and water. But this is incredible. I'm gonna go ahead and tent that with some foil while we wait for the beef to finish. All right, it's been 6 minutes. I'm gonna pull out our meat and see where we are with the temp. I've got the Yorkshire pudding covered with some foil. This looks amazing. It has such a beautiful crust on the outside with that kosher salt and all of those herbs. And those herbs are really bringing a benefit to your overall health. Thyme increases your overall immunity, decreases your inflammation, and helps support overall heart health. Rosemary is an anti-inflammatory, it's an antioxidant, it supports brain health, eye health, and your mental focus. It also improves your mood and reduces stress. And marjoram has antioxidants including vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin K, copper, calcium, magnesium, and iron. And this beef itself is loaded with protein, and it also has antioxidants in the form of zinc, selenium, iron, and then it has B6 and B12. And our asparagus is bringing even more antioxidants that protect against oxidative stress in your body, including vitamin C, E, flavonoids, and polyphenols. Let's give this a temp, so I know if I have to put it back in. Also decreases your cholesterol level by regulating your lipid metabolism, decreases your risk of cancer, specifically breast cancer and pancreatic cancer. It also has antimicrobial properties, decreasing your overall risk of infections. So asparagus, thyme, rosemary, marjoram, and beef, incredible dinner for your overall health. We are at 135 degrees, which is perfect. So we are good to go. I'm gonna turn the oven off. And I'm going to transfer this meat to a cutting board that has my grooves around it so that when I carve it, if juices do run out, they're not gonna run all over the place. But I'm gonna tent that for 15 to 20 minutes before cutting into it so those juices can redistribute and they don't fall out everywhere and then your meat is left dry. So I'm just gonna tent that, and then when we've got 5 minutes left on the rest, we're gonna do the asparagus. So I'm just gonna carefully lift that out. I'll give you a look-see here before we carve into it. This just looks beautiful. Look at the crust on this meat. It is absolutely gorgeous. You do not need an expensive cut of meat to proudly serve a roast beef at any dinner function, holiday or not. I'm just gonna tent that so it stays warm, allows those juices to redistribute. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left on our rest, so we're gonna go ahead and get the asparagus cooked. I've got about a tablespoon of butter in my pan, and I'm gonna turn that on to a medium. If you're not familiar with cooking with fresh asparagus, it does not take long whatsoever. I have washed this and I have taken off the coarse, fibrous, unedible ends on most of it, but I've left 3. So if you do this, then everything in your pan is going to be edible. You're just going to hold it, not by the more delicate tip end, but by the stalk, and you're just going to press with your thumbs gently, and it's going to naturally break where it becomes fibrous, and this is the unedible part. If you do that, then everything in the pan is completely edible. There we go. We are just gonna throw this asparagus in. This is 2 bunches of asparagus because we absolutely love this. Again, loaded with health benefits for you. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of garlic powder in here. This is how I like to season mine. A little bit of black pepper. Seasonings are to taste, so put as little or as much as you'd like. And you can play around with the spices as well. And of course, a little bit of salt. You can even go so bold as to add just a little bit of drippings from your roast beef and pour that in as well. That is going to add tremendous flavor. Since I'm not making a gravy for potatoes, I'm going to add it to my vegetable. And then I'm just going to use some tongs, and we're just going to get everything mixed in with the pan drippings, that little bit of butter, because this is a lot of asparagus, and the seasonings. And this is just gonna take a couple of minutes. You want it tender crisp, you don't want it mushy. And so we're just gonna let it sit here on a medium to a medium high flame. I'm gonna bump that up just a little. We're gonna let it sit here until the bottom layer cooks, and then we're just gonna flip it. And that's only gonna take 2 minutes per side. I'm gonna go ahead and get those flipped around now. They're already darkening up in color. It does not take long to cook asparagus. Less time than you probably think. So we're gonna do about 4 to 5 minutes in this pan total, and that's it. And if you want them to cook even faster, you could cover this with a grease splash guard just to keep the heat in. Just makes it go a little bit quicker. Let's see if that needs one more flip with 1 minute left to go. This looks fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the pan off, and this is cast iron, so it is going to maintain a lot of heat, and just continue cooking these a little bit while we get the meat carved. These look great. That was 4 minutes, but covered for the second 2 minutes. Let's take a look at our roast beef. Oh. Look at this. Now we did lose some juices, and that is because we poked holes in it to take the temperature. That's okay. The juices should have mostly redistributed throughout the meat now. I have sharpened my knife, which is important, and you don't really want to use a serrated knife because you're just going to tear the meat. Roast beef, you should slice thinly. Oh, see, that's exactly how I like it on the ends, not too pink. Hopefully the middle will still be somewhat pink to please others and to allow for some new cooking. while being reheated. I'm perfectly fine with this. This might be a little bit well done for some people's taste, but I think we're gonna be okay. There is still some pink in there. So I would call this a medium, which is exactly how I like it. This looks incredible. And you know what? I think I am gonna try to freeze dry some of this because I do need to get some meat freeze dried. I don't think I've done that on my channel yet. I do have a lot of meat freeze dried in my long-term storage, but I haven't showed that yet. So I think we'll start with some thin slices of roast beef. Look how perfect that is. I am telling you, you do not need to spend a lot of money on an expensive cut of beef to get an amazing result. I'm gonna go ahead and slice the whole thing. It's easier to do it while it's nice and hot. You get a better cut. You can go thinner. And that way I can put some pretty even slices into a freeze dryer load. I don't know when I'll get that done. These will go onto a tray in the freezer, but I don't think there's gonna be much left over. We love this. So it might only be a couple of pieces that goes in, and I'm gonna need to do some more meat then. I'm gonna leave this end piece as is. I know somebody who is gonna love that. It is so beautiful on the outside and lovely on the inside and a little bit thicker. There you have it. Beautifully seasoned, beautifully cooked, beautifully sliced roast beef. We've also got our Yorkshire pudding here, which not surprisingly has deflated a little bit, but still going to be absolutely delicious. This is a denser bread pudding almost. It's fantastic. And then of course we have our asparagus. I'm gonna see if I can pour off some of these drippings into a little catch cup. So if anybody wants it, they can pour it over the top of their meat. Since I did pour the extra drippings from the pan in with the asparagus. So let's see if I can coordinate myself here to do this. Ooh, we made a spill though. We did make a spill. It's not going on the floor though. Not yet anyway. Look at that. Perfect. We lost just a little, but we have some au jus. Now that we have our roast beef sliced and our au jus, I'm gonna go ahead and put the asparagus on my cutting board as well. We're just gonna do this family style because this is not a holiday meal. And I think this would be easier to get my thumbnail picture, quite honestly. Perfectly tender, crisp asparagus that is going to be incredibly flavorful. And then with our Yorkshire pudding, I am just going to slice that into squares. We'll do, I don't want them too big because this is going to be filling. There we go. And then these should just lift right out. And we have a nice savory bread pudding. We'll just get those on our tray. And I will absolutely take it to our table just like this. Put it in the center of the table and just let people take what they want. This looks incredible. It smells fantastic. Let's get plated up and give it a try. I have a lovely plate of roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, and tender crisp pan-seared asparagus, and that was not hard. It did take a little bit of time, but it wasn't like I was slaving over the stove. Oh, and that Yorkshire pudding recipe is from my grandmother. So my aunt, before my grandmother passed away, or I think it was right after my grandmother passed away, she had collected all of Grandma's favorite recipes, that the family has enjoyed for generations, and she made a book out of it. And then she went to the other matriarchs of the family and included some additional recipes, put it into book form, and then sent it out to all of the family, which was so special and so nice. And thank you, Aunt. I still use those recipes. All right, let's give our asparagus a try. Absolutely perfect. Tender, crisp, not mushy, beautiful flavoring on there as well. That is fantastic. I have my Yorkshire pudding here, which I'm just going to take a bite out of. You could cut it up. Such a tradition in my family. Love this. We still have some air pockets in there. It is pretty dense. It's like a bread pudding. It's just lovely. It's nice and savory, which I like. And now let's taste that roast beef. That is incredible. This is a meal that we absolutely love. And again, you do not need to buy an expensive cut of meat to have an impressive roast beef on your table. Those seasonings make all the difference. So not only are they bringing you the health benefits that I mentioned, they are also bringing the flavor. Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Tasty Tuesday. Holiday meal, any time of the year. Perfect roast beef. My name is Kelly. You're at A Better Choice Homestead, and I do hope you come back and visit again soon.